In part 2 of this lecture, we will discuss the chemical constituents of cells. Chemicals in nature can be divided into two categories: organic molecules and inorganic molecules. Organic molecules are compounds that contain both hydrogen and carbon. These may dissolve in water, but they don't release ions. So therefore, they are called non-electrolytes. All other components are considered inorganic compounds. They usually dissolve in water and release ions, making them electrolytes. These are some examples for inorganic substances commonly found in our body. When we talk about organic substances, there are different types of organic substances depending upon their properties. One of them is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates provide energy for cellular activity and are composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, with twice as many hydrogen atoms as oxygen atoms. The simple form is called monosaccharides. They are the smallest units. Then there are disaccharides, which have two of these monosaccharides together. And you have polysaccharides, which many sugars come together to form larger molecules. So monosaccharide, just one sugar molecule. Disaccharide, there is two. And polysaccharide, there are many more. The next organic substance we'll discuss are lipids. Lipids are organic substances that are insoluble in water. There are different types of lipids. For our purposes, we will discuss about triglycerides, phospholipids, and steroids. Triglycerides are the most abundant type of lipids. They supply energy for cellular function. Triglycerides consist of a glycerol group and three fatty acid groups. And we will discuss what these are. And these are the ones that will end up having saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids as well. So this is the structure of a triglyceride, where we mentioned there is a glycerol component shown right here and three fatty acid components shown right here. So when there is a double bond like this becomes an unsaturated fatty acid. When there is no double bonds, these are going to be saturated fatty acids. So the other two types of lipids we mentioned was phospholipids and steroids. Phospholipids consists of a glycerol, two fatty acids, and a phosphate group. So slightly different to the triglycerides that had a glycerol and three fatty acid groups. And these are important structures when it comes to the plasma membrane or the cell membrane of a cell. Steroids are complex carbon ring structures, and these are important when it comes to hormonal function and even in the synthesis of cholesterol. Here we show the representation again of a triglyceride molecule, where we had the glycerol component and the three fatty acids. And the difference between that and a phospholipid is that phospholipid has a glycerol component, two fatty acids, and a phosphate portion, a phosphate ion as well. So because of this structure, we will see that the phospholipid molecules will have a water-soluble head, which is the phosphate portion, and a water-insoluble tail, which is the two fatty acids right here. Steroids, we talked about how they were complex carbon ring structures. So they will have this ring type of carbon structures. Depending upon their structure, they will have various functions, including the cholesterol molecule shown here. And this gives a little bit more of a summary table. So the next organic substance we'll discuss is protein. Proteins are organic compounds that contain carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. So in addition to what we saw in carbohydrates and lipids, now proteins have nitrogens. Some of them can also have some sulfur. Proteins have various functions in our body. They act as structural material, they can act as energy source, certain hormones, certain cell receptors, antibodies, and even as enzymes. Proteins also consist mainly of their building blocks called amino acids. There are about 20 different amino acids that make up all the proteins. So the next organic substance is going to be nucleic acid. So these are the nucleic acids are important in forming genes that eventually synthesize proteins. These are large organic molecules. They contain hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus group. And they are bound in the building blocks called nucleotides. Nucleic acid molecules are chains of nucleotides. So just like amino acid was the building block for proteins, nucleotides are the building blocks for nucleic acids. There are two major types of nucleic acids, RNA and DNA. RNA, which is a ribonucleic acid, are single-stranded and they function in protein synthesis. DNA are double-stranded and they are the storage molecule of genetic information. Then we have a modified RNA molecule called adenosine triphosphate. And this is going to be an important molecule for this course that we will talk about anatomy and physiology, where we will see how ATP, adenosine triphosphate, will be a main energy source for chemical reactions that happen in our body. So we see here RNA, the small unit known as the nucleotide, forming together a nucleic acid structure for RNA. DNA will be a double strand, so two of these strands will form the DNA structure. And then we have the modified RNA molecule called ATP, where it will have an adenosine, a ribose group, and the triphosphate, three phosphate groups. And this is a summary table of the organic compounds that we discussed in this lecture. Next, we will continue with part 3 of this lecture.